Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for joining this radio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the marriage contract and the attendant sort of issues that feed in and out of the marriage contract and its changing place in Western society. Now, and there's another issue, an issue about Halle Berry has commented more than once actually about how the child support that she's required to pay is, as I understand it, in her view, excessive, and that the whole child support model should be revisited and made fairer. Now there's so very few women who actually pay child support. In cases where the man gets custody, it's because the woman is either just plain doesn't want the child or children, or she has she's like locked up in some drug rehab place and can't have them anyway, so she's got no income and she's got no means to pay child support. So the idea of if someone's got any sort of viable employment, in pretty much every situation, 98% thereabouts, it's the man who pays and the woman who has the children. There are some exceptions, such as a fabulously wealthy Hollywood movie star like Halle Berry, and say, well, I don't think they had any children, but some of the famous singers and pop stars, those sort of people who, Adele, for example, who got divorced, had to make a large payout to husbands that either had no money or made no money or made much less money. And that wouldn't be hard if you look at the income of a Hollywood movie star or a famous rock star or something like that. Obviously, their income is going to be higher than pretty much anyone else in town. So, but coming back to the marriage contract, in days sort of gone by, and we're talking really maybe late 1960s and earlier, the idea is that men should not abandon their families. So the courts and the law was quite tough on that. Now there wasn't a large police division or enforcement division in the federal government back in the day, but many men were thrown into prison and arrested, and it was considered to be almost a moral crime, that the idea of abandoning your wife and children. And the concept too was that the women who were abandoned would become equivalent to fallen angels and would have to sell their bodies to the night to get by. And then the thought of this was it was an intake of breath sort of around the room as the moral and religious sort of implications of that were sunk into the crowd. But by the late 1960s, abandonment was rare. But it happened. But abandonment was quite rare. But the view of certainly the activists that wanted big time federal government and state government intrusion into the marriage were assuming or pre-assuming that every man was about to abandon the family, and thus only cruelly draconian measures would prevent him from doing that. So, if you want to abandon the family, well, you're going to lose your house, you're going to lose this, you're going to lose that, you're going to have to pay money, you'll be screwed. You can't leave. But then, sort of almost on the heels of that, came the no-fault divorce thing, and this brings back to comes back rather to, should the marriage contract have value? This idea that either party could sort of waltz out of the marriage for any reason or no reason for that matter. Is that something that encouraged moral decay in the West? I think it did, and I think there are many that would agree with that. But so when the activists say in the United States, they focused on California because there was those joint ownership laws that came really from the days of the gold mine claims and gold mine ownerships, So there was this communal ownership concept of the law. So even though he bought the house, all the members of the marriage equally, in effect, equally owned the house or the assets. So that's where the divorce activists, really put in their time. That was when Ronald Reagan was governor of California. He signed off on this, which seems odd for a guy who's supposed to be right wing, given he signed off on that and then allowed millions upon millions of Mexican illegal immigrants to be given citizenship. Reagan was a dyed-in-the-wool globalist, or led by them, or advised by, controlled by them. So anyway, the activists who were pushing for these, and it was controls on men, no controls on women. It was only controls on men they wanted, and nearly all of these activists were Jewish lesbians or bisexuals. Now there are a few that weren't, but nearly all of them were. The Betty Friedan's, the Shulamith Firesteins, the Hester Eisensteins, all the the Levins and so on. They were nearly all Jewish and nearly all lesbian or as I say, bisexual. So and they were very well funded. I'd like to know where the money came from back in the late 60s. And just as a harbinger of what was going to come, they all got quite generous book contracts and publishing contracts and all sorts of things. Some of them were given jobs as script writers in Hollywood, so they could write feminists, anti-male scripts. And this is even late 60s, early 1970s. So the idea of what the globalists are now doing today, controlling the media and inserting their public opinion influences everywhere and this sort of thing, that was really going on back then, but specifically in the area of family law, divorce law, and so on. So now what happened then with the no-fault divorce is that any woman could leave the marriage and again take all the things with her that she would have had if the man had abandoned her. So either way it went, she was getting everything in the marriage. There was no more or less benefits in the marriage, particularly with his children, than there was previously. So it was a great deal there. Now, so let's look at the marriage contract here. Billie Jean says, I want to become a lesbian, and lead a lesbian lifestyle. I got a lesbian lover here. And so I'm going to leave the marriage. You go, okay, well, fine. It's a free country. Off you go. No. I want to leave the marriage, but I also want to take the house, the kids, the furniture, the car, and I want child support for another 20 years. Now, that changes it a bit. Now, Billie Jean's being richly rewarded for a life decision that's destroying, very destructive life decisions. So if Billie Jean wants to go, and that's again that's fine. It's going to still cause drama and upset. I'm sure the children will be wondering, gee whiz, what's going on here? And the man loses a partner, and there's still drama and carry on there. But now it's entered a new phase that the person that contributes the least to the marriage will walk out richly rewarded for breaking the contract. And should that be allowed? Now, I've known women who've got divorced and they were of the view that they would have, a house, they'd have all these goodies and all these trinkets and all these baubles. And then they realized that they weren't going to get that. And for example, some years ago now, a lady was divorced, lived in a nice house, but when the all the details of the financial details were coming up, then she found out that in fact the business was mortgaged, or the house was put up collateral for the business, and therefore the debt on the house was pretty much the entire value of the house. So she walked out with no house and hardly any furniture and no car. And she sort of was boohooed, and she said, look, if I'd known I wasn't going to get a free house and a free car, I would never have divorced him. So it was just a casual lifestyle thing. He was a bit boring, I just thought I could maybe do better out there, and so it was a lifestyle decision, not based in anything like there was I don't know, unspeakable cruelty or something. Wasn't based on anything. It was It was simply a lifestyle. I think, I'm a bit bored. I think I'll go off and do something else. But I want to do it at someone else's expense. I want to make that very risky life decision, but I want to be able to avoid all that risk, particularly financial risk, by passing the cost of my bad decision onto someone else. Now, so what the marriage contract or the treatment of it was doing was allowing that. It was allowing people to make bad decisions, or particularly women or the lesser income earner, and then passing the consequence or the cost of it and passing the risk of it on to another party, which in this case is the husband or ex-husband or ex-partner. Now, two lesbians are treated very differently, and I followed some court cases where two lesbians had, after a longish relationship, say 10 years or something like that, they'd separated, and one was suing the other for part of their assets. Now, the divorce courts look very much at what social power. Now, no law exists that describes social power or enshrines it in legislation or in legal definition. So it doesn't exist officially, but it's applied ruthlessly in the divorce industry. So you're white, straight male. Anyone else is therefore a minority. You're an oppressor. The other side is the oppressed. You must compensate the oppressed. You damn fucking fascist Nazi oppressor. That's really the architecture of how it works in the divorce court. So, but the judge in one particular case I'm thinking of now said that the woman who was suing the other lesbian for part of her assets said that well, you both have equal social power. Therefore, any decisions you make, bad decisions or unfortunate decisions or destructive decisions you make, are your problem. You can't make someone else pay for it. You made that decision. You must live with it and its consequences. But the judge only said that purely on the basis there were two lesbians who had equal social power. So is social power, because it's ideological, you can't define it, is social power an issue that should be in the divorce industry? I don't believe so, because again, it lacks a legal definition. It must be enshrined in law and defined clearly in law. And before anyone gets married, they need to be acutely aware of what that means. So don't want to get married, I guess. But this is and other lesbian cases, or even homosexual cases for that matter, two homosexuals suing each other. It's the same sort of thing. They say you have equal social, assuming both are white, by the way. There's one where there was a white homosexual with a black homosexual partner, and they made the white guy pay the black guy because he had more social power. So there's those sorts of things go on as well. But the idea of the contract is people enter into a contract ostensibly at least to for example, have children, acquire assets and those sorts of things. And so given that's a very long-term gig, should one person have the arbitrary right to disrupt the whole thing by walking out of the relationship and being richly rewarded for taking a lot of assets with them that they maybe hadn't contributed? Now, I've also seen relationships where, say, both of the partners have been public servants working and getting paid exactly the same wage and exactly the same, but one is very spendthrift and the other's quite careful with money. But that doesn't matter because the guy was careful with money and the wife wasn't. So she was richly rewarded with his savings and his being very careful, where she was blowing her money. But he was penalised heavily for that, just because he was a straight white guy with more social power. Now, the behaviour in the marriage in terms of work and conserving resources, not being spendthrift, not being foolish. One person may be, buying lots of cocaine and doing lines every day. The other may be a shining example of probity and restraint. Why should the sensible, reasonable person subsidise the bad behaviour of the other? So, and the bad behaviour in terms of being spendthrift or careless or refusing to work or whatever the case may be. So these are issues that are part of the fabric of society that we're allowing the least capable, the least moral, the least sensible, the least reasonable be the most richly rewarded based on arbitrary ideological notions of social power. So really that is packaged in with where the marriage contract has gone and why it has declined in value. I think we need to just restore that value. I think the marriage contract is important, and I believe that that ideas of social power that force against their will, someone who's committed no crime, force them to be divested of all their assets or most of their assets and ongoing assets and payments into the future is needs to be completely revisited. So in that sense, I agree with some of the sentiments that Halle Berry, as an example, has put forward. That those are issues and they should be put into the consideration of the total equation. So I think the marriage contract does need to be restored in value. People do need to be held accountable, and the government should butt out of the arrangement insofar as they artificially layer on this social power crap, this bullshit, which is totally ideological, and they force particularly straight white men to be financially ruined on the basis of this, in my view, hysterical, ridiculous, absurd, insane ideology. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.